I spoke to Mark Ranta, Senior Solutions Consultant for ACI Worldwide, and asked him what this development means for businesses and tourists to have access to U.S. credit cards.
We think that it's pretty significant, especially as Cuba starts to open its borders to U.S. tourists. U.S. tourists in the past would have to spend cash only. U.S.-based cards were not accepted in Cuba. With MasterCard's announcement, and as of yesterday, you can start using MasterCard branded cards in Cuba. The need is no longer there to be carrying large sums of cash to transact on the island.
Yeah, look, I having traveled in developed countries, I can tell you safety is a major issue for tourists. You don't want to carry around $20,000 in cash, let alone $500 in cash, and having credit cards obviously gives you another level of safety. But that said, there's a couple different currencies in Cuba as well. How do we resolve that situation?
Yeah, well, the transaction will actually take care of the conversion for U.S.-based clients. So they'll swipe their card, and the foreign transaction fee will actually happen more or less unbeknownst to them, similar to the way it happens when U.S. travelers go to Europe today or the U.K. You make your transaction in the local currency, and then when you actually see it on your bill, the foreign transaction fee has been applied, and the conversion rate has been applied. So I don't think that will be as big of an issue, especially given the fact that these transactions will be happening via card. And I think that the consumer behavior is already expected on that front.
Yeah, a couple things. There's an infrastructure that's needed to do credit card transactions, either a phone line or an internet line. All that stuff is in place, I assume, for most of the major merchants. How seamless will it be to have that, the point of sale cash register essentially, and the bank, and also the transferring of money back and forth, because you also have money that's going to be coming out of whether a U.S. bank account into Cuba, yep, and back and forth. So this is something that's a little bit different than the traditional Western Union type of transaction, right?
Definitely. So I think one of the good things and important things to note is that the infrastructure is there today, especially when you're talking the major cities, the major urban centers within Cuba. They currently do take non-U.S. based cards. So a lot of the European branded financial institutions, actually, you can transact via those type of credit cards today. So I think when you're talking the urban centers, we're well established and good to go. It gets more interesting once you get out of the urban centers, and to your point, getting away from that set up infrastructure with phone lines and access to cellular networks. It's going to get a little more interesting once you get out there. I think it's something that the banks are going to have to keep a close eye on. So as those further, more rural areas get set up, there's going to be a good growth and place for the different merchants to learn and start accepting these non-cash-based transactions.
What about fraud? What about cybersecurity, sort of the dark side of credit card use? I mean, you have to be talking to your clients about this, right?
Yeah, especially with the risk ratings. U.S.-based customers obviously haven't been able to transact using credit cards today. So that first time, a rich person from Miami goes down and wants to buy one of those beautiful 1950s cars in Havana, seeing that first swipe transaction attempt at $30,000 U.S.-based currency would be kind of a big thing for a MasterCard or Amex or any of the other networks to get a handle of. So there's going to be some learning. You don't want to let one of those large transactions through, but again, you want the consumer experience to be there. So there's definitely going to be we need to keep a close eye on the fraudulent transactions in this space. But I think it'll be a little bit bumpy at first, but as more and more transactions start to happen and the merchants establish themselves with the U.S. networks, you'll see that kind of even itself out.
So, okay, so that's great news. You and I can hop on a plane or a ship or a boat and make our way to Cuba and spend money. What about the Cubans? Can they apply for credit cards? Can they get credit? Can they take this and go somewhere else and spend money just like any other tourist as well? And I guess what's the infrastructure that's needed for these major credit card companies?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing will be for the U.S.-based banks and financial institutions to keep a very close eye on U.S. regulators and stay in lockstep with as we loosen different financial regulations in place. You may see more and more U.S. financial institutions open up branches on the island and allow the locals to start opening up U.S.-based accounts. That's probably not going to happen right out of the gate, but I think that as banks and financial institutions keep a close eye on that, you'll likely start to see it in the future.